This clock is not brass. It's not even old. It's a $5 plastic thrift store clock, and I still can't believe how it turned out. I have 4 more items from the thrift store, and you're going to love these makeovers. Let's get started. By the way, my name is Cindy, and I'm so glad you're here. You're probably much like me, that you love to go to the thrift store and find things that you can refresh or make over. That's what I'll be doing in this video with 5 projects. Stay tuned all the way to the end for all of the reveals of each one of these projects. We're going to go over step by step what I did, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me down in the comments below. I've been giving each room in my home a refresh, and the next room will be the master bathroom. The projects that you see in this video are going to be in that bathroom, so I thought I would just go ahead and get all these projects completed. This cabinet is going to be adorable in that room, but it definitely needs some help. I got rid of the things that I didn't like. For instance, that little picture that was on the front of it, and then the knob. Now, when I took that picture out, it kind of fell apart. So I had to do some gluing, and that's just fine. But the nice thing was it did come with this really stiff board, and I came up with a 2-sided way of covering this board. One side is a piece of scrap fabric that I had in my sewing room, and the other is this beautiful decoupage paper. I applied a clear coat to adhere this decoupage paper to the surface, and then I laid it down and smoothed it out with a brayer. It worked perfectly. On the fabric side, I used spray adhesive, and then I applied that fabric, and I used the brayer as well to smooth out that surface really nice. Having this little dustbuster in my craft room is so handy. So for instance, when I had to sand that little area where the hole was, I could just clean up the mess very quickly, and I didn't have sawdust all over the place. You can see that I had to repair that little area where I removed the knob, and one thing that I found in my stash was this little keyhole. It's one of these wood appliques. I glued it on with Titan Bond, and it just looks adorable. I also have a glass knob in my stash, and I grabbed one of those as well. You'll see lots of products that I used, for instance, the Brite to clean that knob, and then also the Titan Bond glue that I used. I'm going to have all the products that I used linked down in the description. I also like wearing this apron, especially when I'm painting and I have nice clothes on. I've got a video about how I made this out of a drop cloth, and I'll link it here in the QR code. I wasn't able to use the glass in this small cabinet because the thickness of the fabric made it too thick, and I wasn't able to close those tacks down to hold it in. Those tacks also showed up, and I didn't like that. So I grabbed some glue and I glued a decorative ribbon around the outside edge. Now I started off using my glue gun, but it took too long to heat up, so I used Tite Bond again. And of course, by the time I was finished, my glue gun was hot enough to use. That's how it works, right? This little storage box is adorable the way that it is, except for the inside. I was able to just rip all of the insides of that out, and that was just fine. And then I started to clean the outside of it. Now that's where I ran into a problem, because as I cleaned, the decal, the decorative part on the outside just was rubbing off, so I knew I wasn't going to be able to save it. But that's okay. I came up with another idea of using another one of those beautiful wooden pieces, appliques, to lay on the top. I used my measuring tape in both directions to find out the center, and then I used my quilting ruler so that I could line this up and completely center this in the middle of this box. Tite Bond sets up in about 10 minutes, but it is good to let it dry overnight. I used painter's tape to hold it still while it dried, and then when it was done, I applied a coat of primer over the whole thing and then had to decide the color. I went with this darker color blue because those are the colors that are in my room that this box will look best. To get around the details of this kind of wood overlay, it's good to use just a little bit of paint on your paintbrush and dab, dab, dab in all sorts of directions. You don't want it to puddle up, so you've got to be careful of that. And I also like the texture that dabbing brings. You can see here it added lots of texture to the top of it, and I really like that. Then I grabbed the brown wax just to knock down the color a little bit and give it some age. and I buffed it off with a soft cloth. Now I got paint on the hinges and on that front closure, so I just grabbed a little piece of sandpaper and sanded it off. It came off just fine. Then I went over the whole thing with wax. Buffing out the details around that beautiful piece on the top was super easy with a shoe polishing brush. Be sure to grab one of those the next time you see it when you're out at the thrift store. They're very handy. And that top piece just needs a little bit more help, so I added a gilding wax to the top of it with a small artist brush, and that was the final touch. I found this sweet little step stool when I was shopping with one of my daughters at her local thrift store in Virginia. I think it was only $6 at the Restore. It is so cute, but it does have coats and coats of paint, and I wasn't sure if the paint was lead or not. So I used this simple test kit in several areas to discover whether or not it was lead-based paint. Thankfully, it was not. You just read the directions on this package. You grab a bottle of vinegar. It's a very easy test. I'll have that test linked down in the description along with all the other products. Here I'm using a paint stripper to remove the layers of paint. Now, I do not advise that you get the spray version of these paint removers. They're terrible. Instead, get the tub of it. But I had this on hand and wanted to use it up, so I just poured it onto the piece and spread it out, and then I read the directions, and it needed to sit for at least 30 minutes to an hour. I was able to scrape off a lot of it, but I did have to apply another coat that night. After I got all this first layer scraped off, I went in there at about 9 o'clock at night and added another layer. You can put a cardboard box to good use. Flatten it so that it will lay flat on the ground, and then put your item on top of that so that you can contain the mess all within the confines of that box. I did this, now it was down on the floor, so that was difficult. I'm not getting on the floor as often as I used to, but at least the mess was all contained, and I was able to wipe my putty knife right onto the cardboard box for the next round of scraping. It really did work out great. And then at the end, all I had to do was fold up this box and dispose of it. Next, I took the solid wood stool out to my hose along with clean and strip and a stiff nylon brush, and I thoroughly scrubbed this stool to remove all of the leftover paint stripper as well as any paint residue that was there. Then I hosed it off and I allowed it to dry in the sun all day. I didn't get this next part recorded. I think it was about 7 o'clock in the morning, but I did take this little stool over to the workshop and used a power sander over the whole thing. I still had to use the hand sander on a couple spots that I missed. Now you'll see on the natural top as we go through this project that there were still some orange toned dots on the solid wood surface on the top. That is just leftover paint that soaked into the wood, and I was not going to be able to get that out. But I'm okay with that. I have a solution to disguise it. Now it's not going to cover it completely, but it will disguise it, and it's going to make this stool just adorable and so vintage looking. The colors in my bathroom are going to be tones of green and blue, and that is why I'm focusing on these colors. And that's a tip. Find the colors for the room that you like, and then those thrift store pieces that you want to upcycle, use those colors that you have for that room. Once the paint was dry, I applied dark wax to the whole surface, especially that wooden top. I love how vintage it looks when you apply dark wax to raw wood. I also applied it to the blue just to knock that color back a little bit. Now you'll see that there are red feet under this stool. I think I might have to put little scuff pads underneath there because my grandkids will be using this stool to reach up to the sink to brush their teeth in Mimi's bathroom. I used a soft cloth to bring a nice soft luster to this little stool. I came across this $4 basket at the thrift store. It was Goodwill. You can recognize that tag, and I could hardly believe this price. $4 for a picnic basket is great, but I think it was so cheap because the lid did not line up with the basket very well. It was very distorted. So I grabbed a trash can that was clean and I filled it up with water from the hose, and I put that basket in there along with a rock to hold it down. Now when I went back, it was floating, believe it or not. Even though I had a rock in it, floated, and I had to put another rock in there. This basket sat in the trash can filled with water for 24 hours. Soaking up all that water made the wood of this beautiful woven basket more pliable. So I grabbed my clamps and then I used some pressure to bring the sides of that basket in towards where the lid is, because that's the proper size of this basket. So that's kind of my gauging point of how far to squeeze this in. You see here me lining it all up. And I used 2 clamps on this, and it sat, I think, for about 3 days, just like this. I even put it out in the hot sun to just let it bake until it was completely dry. Like I said, I think it was about 3 days. This natural wood basket just needs a little bit of help, just like an old piece of furniture. So I removed those clamps, brought it inside, and you can see there, look how nice and lined up that is. I'm thrilled. I didn't do any sanding or anything like that, and it's already clean because it's soaked in water. All I did was grab this Restore Finish in the neutral color. So I'm not adding color to this. I'm just nourishing the wood fibers of this basket. Now, it's good to wear gloves because this stuff does get under your fingernails and it can be kind of messy. And I put my gloves on. Again, I laid out another Amazon box to protect my surface. I got a disposable chip brush and just saturated this basket in the Restore Finish. Once it was completely coated, I allowed it to dry for 1 full day. This stuff is amazing. Look at the difference it makes on the lid of this item. I left all the stains, you can see that, but this wood is just soaked it in, and you can really see the areas where I didn't apply the Restore Finish. Such a difference. I saved the best project for last. It was this $5 clock. I bought it not even knowing if it would work, but I thought if it doesn't work, I can at least replace the mechanism, the clock mechanism. I did not like the front palm tree on the front of this clock face. Not pretty at all, but the hands were very pretty. I had a little bit of trouble getting those hands to come apart, and I even tried pliers. I'm so glad I didn't mess it up. So I got on Google and I searched how to take these hands apart. Well, evidently, it's just that little center pin that just comes right out. I was able to lift it right out with my finger, no problem. Then I sanded down that clock face, and I printed a new clock face using a program called Canva. It is a free program, and this design was absolutely free. I just had to print it on my own computer. I printed it on cardstock so that it would have some stiffness, and then I cut it out to go around that circle. I was able to resize it to fit the interior size of this clock face. Scan the QR code with your phone camera, and then you can sign up for my email and gain access to get this clock face for your next clock project. Every thrift store piece should be thoroughly cleaned before you decide to add any new finishes to it. That's what I did here. And then when it was dry, I applied this beautiful antique gold gilding wax. It's similar to Rub and Buff, but you get a lot more bang for your buck with this little tub of gilding wax. I used a little artist brush to apply it, and it gets all into the nooks and crannies, and I used like a swirling motion. It made a really pretty effect. This clock was missing the backing completely, so I used a similar technique that I did earlier by covering a stiff piece of cardboard with that same gold fabric that I had. And I cut off little bits of that circle off at a time to make sure that it would fit as close as I could. To reassemble the clock, I used the 3 prongs that it came with, and I had to kind of squeeze them together so that it would have some tension. And then you put that one end, it's in the shape of a V, inside, and use the 2 long parts to go underneath the ridge that goes around that clock. Then I used some little glue dots to attach the back. I need to be able to pull it off quickly so I can change that battery when I need to. You'll notice in the background that I added a special touch to that little wooden box. Okay, friends, it's time for the before and afters. Let's play some music and just sit back and enjoy all of the beautiful transformations that we did today. Comment below and tell me your favorite project from all that we worked on today. Subscribe to my channel so you don't miss that bathroom refresh in the coming weeks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.